Following two officer-involved shootings in Beloit in the last 2 months, questions arise about how officers are trained for unpredictable life and death situations. 23 News reporter Sydney Stoffregan talks to the Northern Illinois Training Advisory Board's executive director.
They're there to bring peace where there's chaos.
At any moment, a simple traffic stop can turn into something much worse for an unprepared officer. That's why the Northern Illinois Training Advisory Board runs officers through real-life simulations. Executive Director Jeff Schelling says if de-escalating a situation doesn't work, officers must be prepared to protect innocent civilians and themselves.
In terms of dealing with situations and how does an officer determine what goes on, the officer most of the time does not determine where that goes. It's the individual's choice as to where they make that officer go.
State's Attorney Jay Hanley works with the Winnebago-Boone Integrity Task Force to respond to and investigate officer-involved incidents. He determines if the officer involved abided by the law.
There's a recognition that officers have to make essentially split-second decisions, and it's not just to second-guess their every move, that you have to look at what they reasonably believed was going on during the incident.
Schelling trains officers in relating to the emotional level of a suspect. He says a civil conversation is key to keep all parties safe.
Try to be the counselor, the social worker, the person to help bring it down, to let them know, hey, I'll listen to you, but we're going to have to talk about some things here, but let's get here to a rational level.
The Northern Illinois Training Advisory Board works with over 1,200 officers in Winnebago, Boone, and DeKalb counties. In the event an officer-involved incident turns fatal, Schelling says all departments provide resources to help officers through that trauma.